Hello and welcome to the Avrum Rosensweig Show.
Welcome to one of the internet's best podcasts, where we dive deep into the lives of the extraordinary and fascinating people who leave an indelible mark on our world. Join us as we explore their captivating stories, remarkable achievements, and unique perspectives that shape history and inspire generations. Get ready to embark on a journey through the lives of inspiring people unlike any other.
Hello, folks, and welcome to the Avrum Rosensweig Show. Indeed, my name is Avrum Rosensweig, and I'm delighted to be here with you. As everybody knows who's watched the show, the idea behind what we do here on this podcast is really, it's to pat humankind on the back for a job well done. And we do that through inspiring interviews. From time to time, we go the panel route, and that's very, very exciting because it brings voices together, often from all over the world, to talk about a particular issue and to try to work it through so that we, the listener, we, the viewer, can have a better understanding about some of the machinations of the world in which we live. I am deeply, deeply inspired by many, many people, whom I've interviewed. I love life. I love the world in which we live, and I'm extraordinarily conscious, too, of its pockmarks. Now, one of its pockmarks is what we call genocide. And genocide is defined in a particular way of which we will deal with in a few moments. Genocide is, on a very base level, an awful, awful thing, a terrible thing that causes great destruction within an environment, which causes the death often of thousands, if not millions of people. It has been discussed in the United Nations, in governments around the world, and unfortunately, in 2025, genocides continue. Today, I want to talk with my panelists about what we can do as educators, as writers, as authors, what has been done in order to stymie this very evil force of which we call genocide. With me today are really three terrific individuals whom I've interviewed in the past, one of whom is Providence Umagwaneza. Hopefully I'm saying that correctly. And she is a Rwandan survivor and author, and she'll share her personal story of resilience and the importance of education in preventing genocide. Elizabeth Mehren, who is in Oregon, a distinguished journalist and author, offers her insight into the role of media in shaping awareness and action. And Tali Nates, who is in South Africa, is the founder of the Johannesburg Holocaust and Genocide Center. She'll bring her expertise on the vital work of education in confronting historical violence. I should mention that Provi is in Dallas. So welcome, everybody, and thank you so much for joining me today. How's everybody doing?
Great.
Lovely to be here.
I want to start the panel discussion with a definition of what genocide is. And I want you to jump in at any time and tell me whether indeed this is the definition that you subscribe to, and then one that makes sense for our world today. It's the intention and the systematic destruction of a particular nation, ethnical, racial, or religious group, either in whole or in part. This includes actions such as killing members of the group, causing serious bodily or mental harm, deliberately inflicting living conditions meant to destroy the group, imposing measures to prevent births, or forcibly transferring children from one group to another. The term genocide was coined in 1944 by Polish Jewish lawyer Raphael Lemkin, and it became internationally recognized as a crime under international law, particularly through the United Nations Convention on the Prevention and Punishment of the Crime of Genocide in 1948. Tali Nates in South Africa, the founder of the Johannesburg Holocaust and Genocide Center. Is that the working definition of genocide?
So thank you very much, and lovely to be here again. I think I will start with the fact that the word did not exist. And I think it's there was no word to describe this act until 1944, until Raphael Lemkin coined it in his seminal work, and took actually Latin and Greek words and put them together influenced by history. I'm a historian, so allow me to say that being influenced by history, by the mass murder of the Christian Armenians during the First World War by the Ottoman Empire, seeing the pogroms in first Tsarist Russia, and then during the revolution, and then of course seeing what is happening in Europe during the Second World War. We didn't call it Holocaust. Holocaust also is a word that we are only using from the 1950s on. So you have to look at it historically. There was no word. There was no definition because there was no word. It was not part of international crime, not even in Nuremberg, even though the word was used. And actually, only your definition is coming into effect in 1948 when the United Nations is born and the convention, again, the convention is coming to be in 1948, in December 1948. So yes, it is a legal definition of the Convention for the Prevention and Punishment of the Crime of Genocide, coming to effect in December 1948, and later on developing further and further. And this is the only definition that we have. Maybe it's not perfect, but that is the legal definition that we have to work with.
Elizabeth Mehren, your most recent book is called I Live to Tell the World, and you present 13 very, very inspiring profiles of refugees who have settled in Oregon, where you live. They come from Rwanda, Myanmar, Bosnia, Syria, and other such places. You have firsthand experience with individuals who have gone through genocide or a genocidal environment. What happens to those people, Elizabeth?
Well, it's always dangerous, I think, to generalize about those people because, of course, they're individuals.
Yes.
And so it's not safe to make a blanket statement. What I was attracted to among the people that we profiled in this book was the ability to make it through just extraordinary, unimaginable, unthinkable circumstances and resume life. And 201, I encounter anger and righteous anger, I think, but never bitterness. And actually, Provi, I was at a conference in Sacramento not long ago of genocide, so the International Conference on Genocide, and a wonderful Rwandan survivor said to me that she learned early on that, quote, vengeance was not the answer, unquote. So it was which is a phrase that has stuck with me because I've heard it myself as well. Actually, last night here in Corvallis, Oregon, which is the home of Oregon State University, we had an evening where we had 4 live testimonies from survivors from Cambodia, Syria, Rwanda, and Bosnia. And it was a full audience. People are very, very eager to hear the stories. I think because they're stories about resilience and courage and human cruelty all wrapped into one. And somehow hearing the human testimonies makes these unimaginable mass atrocities accessible to the human soul.
Provi, you are a survivor of the Rwandan genocide in 1994. 5 of your siblings and your 2 parents, along with the rest of your extended family, were killed, were murdered. And we give you a big hug, a big extended hug. And as they say in Jewish, you should always have simchas, which means you should always have celebrations in your life. You wrote a book about your experience called Next Couple of Hours. And you talked extensively about what you had gone through, what your family had gone through after the war was over, which was only about 100 days, what you came back to. So just to switch around my question to Elizabeth, you were there, you experienced it. What did that experience in life do to you shortly afterwards, and then today as a mother and a wife?
Yeah, thank you. I can say that I am thankful to be a survivor because when you live long, that's when you get to realize that to be a survivor is more than words can express what it is. So I feel very much grateful to be a survivor, but also who doesn't have those physical scars. I'm sure maybe Tali knows how many, some of the survivors, since she's been to Rwanda several times, how they have, physical scars from machetes. And I'm sure she met, women who went through violence, sexual violence. It's um, it's an honor, but also you feel responsible to speak up for those who are not there with us anymore because they have been killed, and you find a reason to be a survivor, to educate the world about about the genocide, to also be a witness just in case your voice is needed for those who are there also to deny that the genocide took place. So I would say that you don't realize when you look back that you were able to survive the genocide against Tutsi in Rwanda because it was really cruel. If someone has to be cut with a machete, and to be shot, you have to pay some money, and some victims didn't have money to pay because you had to leave things behind, everything, or they would take everything from you. So, of course, if you are unable to pay, they are going to cut you with a machete in so many pieces. To me, to be a survivor means a lot, and my responsibility to witness, I feel like it's an honor as well. So, as a mother today, I feel so much challenged to look at my children. Matter of fact, our first one is 11 now, and that's the age I was in the genocide against Tutsi in Rwanda. And I all the time think about it, and I'm like, if something happens to her, can she really know what to do? Can she really adapt herself if she has to go live in another life? So as a mother, I get challenged so much, and I also get to see how the genocide affected so many lives, especially for those orphans and parents who knew their children maybe have been killed or they have been killed in front of their eyes. So as a mother, I'm so much challenged, and I'm overwhelmed to think what a parent goes through when they are going to be killed, or if you know your kids are going to be killed. This is something I didn't understand before I had children. And at the same time, I educate my children to make a difference in their community, even if it's very small, but it's their responsibility to bring in the world and to leave the world better than how we found it. So it's uh, it's really hard as a mother to think about your experience when you have children. You know they can go through what we went through during the genocide against Tutsi in 1994.
Provi, do you today overall trust humankind after going what you've gone through?
I do. I do, because I know even if you went through the genocide against Tutsi in our country, um, matter of fact, not every Hutu was a killer, because those who committed the genocide against Tutsi, they were radicals. But I know there is still many good people in the world. That's that I, because after I survived, I had good people in my life, and those people were able to take me from one point to another, and that's how I was able to get where I am today. So I have faith in humanity, and I know together we can work towards um, changing lives and make this world a better place, even for our future generation.
Tali, you told a story when we first talked in our first interview how you went to Rwanda, sort of a peace conference, a process, a program that you were part of to bring peace to that country. And there was a fascinating story that you told, of which you were sitting all together for a number of hours, as we do at conferences. And at some point, you had to go to the washroom, right? And it was about a mile and a half away. And there was a fellow sitting next to you who was actually a perpetrator of, I believe, a lot of destruction within one village. He had killed a number of people, and he offered to take you to the washroom. Do you want to continue that story?
Wow, good memory, Avrum.
Yeah, thank you, Tali.
Yeah, I think I like Provi's answer, because it is, people have choices, and every day of their life. And that story that you're asking me to tell was, first of all, it was only 10 years after the genocide. It was in 2000 and, no, it was 12 years after the genocide. Sorry, it was in 2006. It was one of the perpetrators that were released after 10 years. As Provi knows, there were amnesty sort of processes that were given by the government. So this perpetrator was released early after 10 years. And when I'm saying choices, he had choices to join this unity and reconciliation processes that were set up. He was working with survivors and with families of victims and with, others to try to make Rwanda a better place. I had a choice because, it was a moment where you kind of think, what do you do? You're in the middle of nowhere. Sort of, we were sitting in the fields, surrounded by the mountains, and I needed to go, as you said, about a mile with this man that I did not know, but heard the story of a few minutes before that. But I go back to what Provi said, because they are human beings, and people are choosing paths in their life, and he chose the path at that stage of working together to rebuild Rwanda. And I think I told you that one of the moments that was quite interesting was a part of justification and why did he do it, and the conversation that we had was that he said to me a few times, I will look after you, and he took my hand and he safely took me there and took me back. And it was a moment that I will never forget. That taught me quite a lot about human behavior, about human choices, and about, giving people also more chances in life.
I think the phenomenal thing about that story was, what you alluded to, was when you came back and you sat down together again, you said you turned to him and you said, I'd like to ask you how it is that you did what you did. And his response was what, Tali?
So, it's very interesting because, of course, he explained that, he was threatened, and if he wouldn't do it, others. And I heard that before and since and after, there was real threats many times to young people, and there was the group mentality, and there was camaraderie, and, that. But the other thing that he said that also stayed with me was that if he had the chance again, knowing what he knows now, he would not do it. He's living with that guilt and with that torment since. So you have to sort of, I did it. I was with the mob. I did do it. But knowing what I know now, I don't think I'll do it. Would it be true or not? Of course, you cannot know. When your life is threatened, you don't know. But that conversation and his maybe torment, his moment of thinking back is a lesson, I think, for us all, because we don't know what we will do in a moment like that. Avrum, not you, not me, not anyone.
Yeah, it's very, very true. I just interviewed a fellow by the name of Dr. Judd Newborn, who is a curator. He's a fascinating individual, an Emmy Award winner, and a Holocaust educator. And he visited way back when SS guards who were in jail. And he told me that one of them he actually liked. And he sent him a can of coffee afterwards because this fellow said, "What am I doing in jail? I should be out there talking to kids in school about what I've done, because what I did was wrong. It was absolutely wrong." Now, Elizabeth, from the flip side, the survivors, of which you've spoken to many from Syria, from Rwanda, from the Holocaust, their character of allowing them to push forward, it's phenomenal. I have been at many celebrations with Holocaust survivors where they are dancing at their grandchildren's bat mitzvah or bar mitzvah. Similarly, Rwandan celebrations. So what have you discovered about humankind through your interaction, very deep interaction, with survivors of genocides?
Oh, there's so much to discover. I want to just respond briefly, though, to Provi, because one thing that you said about the need to bear witness really stuck with me. And that's something I've heard over and over. And I'm thinking a lot about, he's now my friend, Emmanuel Turaturanye. He's really groovy. I really love him. He calls me his sister. I call him my brother. And when the very first time I interviewed him, it was a long, very intense interview, and we were sitting on a rock in a park. And I asked him why he thought that he and the baby sister he rescued from outside and ran like crazy, why they alone survived from a very large extended family in the village in which his father was the Anglican pastor, and his whole family was massacred. And he paused. He's a thoughtful guy, and he paused and he said, "I think I lived in order to tell the world." And that gave me the name of the book, for one thing. But also I've heard this over and over, which is basically, how can we stop this? Can we stop it? Well, we can speak out and we can describe it and we can talk about the consequences and we can talk about the origins. Emmanuel's also taught me a great deal about the differences between reconciliation and forgiveness. And those are two really abstract concepts that most of us don't address in daily life, but maybe we should. And he knows them obviously firsthand in a way that most of us don't. So I wanted to get to that point first, but can you repeat your question, because I've just been carrying on?
Yeah. I mean, I think we have a sense of why some of the perpetrators of genocide might be involved. That Tully alluded to it. I want to know the flip side. I want to know the survivors of genocide. What is it about the human spirit that allows so many people to forge ahead and create a beautiful life for themselves? How do they do it?
Well, it's important to say that not everyone does.
Not everyone does. Yes.
Yeah, some people retreat into bitterness and retreat into anger and retreat into almost non-functioning qualities or into defining everything on the basis of their terrible experience. But those who do survive and those who have made new lives, I have to start with the quality of resilience, which is extraordinary in each person that I interviewed. Determination, perseverance, the ability to push through no matter what, and also kind of eyes on the prize, like life is the prize. And I don't want to feed into some trope about either grateful immigrants or grateful survivors, but a sense that they made it and they want their lives to mean something. And so, for example, Emmanuel, my friend from Rwanda, when he was married, went back to his village and invited the perpetrators to his wedding.
Wow.
Because he wanted, and I get kind of goosebumps when I talk about it, because he said there could not be true forgiveness without that. And he says every day is a lesson in forgiveness and resilience for him, moving forward. But I think the other answer is a sense of perspective, that is keeping in mind that every day is a gift, and that I don't know, again, I don't want to sound corny. I sound like a Hallmark greeting card, but I don't want to. But that making the world better, as Provi was saying, is an important mission. And that, in other words, being bitter and being angry isn't going to get us anywhere, but moving forward will. And I hear this over and over and over from people. Last night I was talking to a young woman from Syria, and she's gone on. She's remarkable, just a stunning person. She talked her way into a private high school by walking into the headmaster's office and saying, "You need me."
I love that.
And at the end of the conversation, he said, "Well, I guess I do," you know.
I love that. Yeah.
And then she found the only university she could find that gave full scholarships to Syrian survivors, right? So she just finished her 4-year degree. She's just full of well, she's full of beans, but she's full of steam too, and ready to go forward and ready to do things. And she's going to save the world. She's got it. She's got that determination and that sense of understanding that things could be a whole lot worse. Does that make sense? And
Yeah.
that,
No,
you know,
absolutely.
I mean, I don't want to say she's running around, singing bluebirds all the time. It's not that.
No, we need people like that. 100%.
We
Proby,
do.
my sister, Javi, her husband was murdered in 2002. And we've gone through a whole litany of, court things and throughout the years. And he was recently up for parole and so on. She does not forgive this man. She does not. And she won't. And her family does not. Elizabeth alluded or talked about the idea that forgiveness is important. I don't think you meant carte blanche. Sometimes it is. Have you forgiven those people who have caused your family such loss and pain? You're there, Provi. Can you hear me? Yeah, I'm asking you. Yes.
I haven't because I think sometimes forgiveness comes from, one person, but doesn't really mean necessarily the other person. Even if you were together during the genocide, you're going to feel the same. In our case, we didn't have a chance to have closure with our loved ones. So I still have hope that I will see them since I didn't have closure. It's really hard to live a life when you know they bury your parents, your siblings. It's like sometimes you feel like your life is in the air. So for me, I taught something to myself that a best revenge is success. And I am not feeling any bitterness towards the killer, the perpetrator. But I also have survivors who chose to forgive. And they said the reason why they're doing this, it's because of themselves. Like it hurts really bad. It hurts, and they have to give peace to themselves. And that's the reason why they are doing this. But for me, I don't feel like I am at that stage. I used to travel back to my village because right after we survived, my grandmother was living there. Some of them shamelessly will show up there and they will make some comments. They will say, "Oh, we didn't know you survived. Oh, you look like your father." And I know some of them are the ones who were saying, "How is she still alive? She looks like her dad. You should have, finished everyone. What type of work are you doing?" So for me, it's really hard to even think about forgiving someone who doesn't have a remorse of what they did to my loved ones. And this is something I keep thinking about every day. Sometimes I'm trying to figure out how they killed my 2-year-old brother. And I'm thinking maybe they cut his head first, or they threw him in the river, or what did they do to my mother who had a baby? Now that I have children, I understand the pain of my mother. I think about my cousins, my friends, everybody. It's like I am a tree without branches, but thankfully that I have a family and few of my family members were able to survive, but it's really hard to get to a point you can forgive. And Avram, you know that I'm religious. This is something, and in our religion, forgiveness is something that is
Yes.
very kind of fundamental, if I can say. but it's really hard. If I have to be honest, it's so hard, and I don't know. It's hard.
You know, Provia, I've met with many survivors, especially the Holocaust, as mentioned. And there's something about these people, the Nate Leipzigers of the world here in Toronto. He's really the voice of the Holocaust in Canada. Your spirits are so beautiful. Like your soul is so illuminated. And I'm not saying, God forbid, well, you went through this and this is where he brought you today. It's, you know, it's good that you went. It's not good that you went. It's terrible that you went through it. But I think that you have such an illuminated understanding of life, more so than people who have not gone through that, a deeper understanding of what forgiveness can be, acceptance can be, bringing people together, unity. And you display it in a most lovely and well articulated way. So I just want to say that. I just want to thank you for that.
Oh, thank you. Thank you so much. And one thing that I can add is that we have fellow survivors who chose to forgive, like
Yeah.
both of you mentioned about the choices we make, but we respect their choices and we support them because we are created differently. If they are at the stage of forgiving and I'm not there yet, then we're going to choose to understand each other, even if you're not agreeing on that, particular subject of forgiving the perpetrators. And I really would be interested in knowing a perpetrator who is saying, I did this. Someone who is regretting, like Elizabeth, is it Elizabeth or Tali, who said someone who is regretting. I think it's Tali. But I never seen a perpetrator who comes towards me and says, I am sorry, I
Yes.
really did. I did have a chance to meet such people who can show me some remorse because maybe I will understand things differently from the way I understand them. But yeah, we have survivors who forget the perpetrators, like Elizabeth mentioned.
Tully, what I find very interesting about your life and your choice of careers is that you decided, like Elie Wiesel or similar, to ensconce yourself in studying and understanding and knowing and teaching about Holocausts and genocides. Now, in our world today, it's not as though we have a lack of genocides. Um, there isn't. What is going on in Sudan today, that Darfur conflict that we've spoken about for so many years, that Mia Farrow was very loud about a number of years ago, it continues to go on today. The number of people being murdered in Syria is astronomical. The Uyghur genocide in China, the Rohingya genocide in Myanmar. Now, you chose a career of which you are thinking about, wondering about, learning about, teaching about man's inequity to man, about the injustices that occur on our planet, about the terrible, brutal, and violent things that one person can do to another. What a difficult career you chose.
Yeah, it's interesting that you framed it like that, and I'm reflecting on what the wonderful stories that Elizabeth shared with us in Provis, and I'm thinking about my father was a survivor, a Holocaust survivor. He survived 6 camps. My uncle was a survivor. My father was the silent survivor. He did not speak. He was very traumatized and did not speak. My uncle, that was 4 years older than him, found the words and could speak. So I grew up with with living history, I would say. For me, history was alive through the silences of my father and the words of my uncle that wrote poetry and spoke at schools and volunteered at museums and was so proud that I was interested in history. So I think, in a way, why am I choosing this career of educating to prevent, really, to prevent suffering, to prevent what Provi went through in her, the horrific events that Provi or my father or uncle went through is to try and learn from history. And it's interesting when you speak about forgiveness. And I'm wondering, about my father or uncle. My uncle chose to go back to Germany in 1965 and testify in a trial. So he chose justice. I choose history, teaching. He chose writing and justice. And in the trial, by the way, of two huge perpetrators from where he was, southwestern Poland, one got 4.5 years prison and the other one 7.5 years prison. So it's not as if they got, life sentence for the crimes that they did. But he chose that route and actually was interviewed for a German newspaper after, and he said, whatever the court decides, he wasn't a religious man, but he said, in the end, God will give them their punishment. And he wasn't a religious man, but he felt that in a way he did what he did, and it doesn't really matter that they did not get the punishment that they deserved. So I'm trying to offer a few ways that I'm thinking about. I do believe that you need to learn, have critical thinking, know the facts, learn about what is happening in the world. And that's the reason I created a museum. I believe that a museum, a place for conferences and talks and events and lectures and films, is an important place for education. But my uncle's way of seeking justice, going the justice way, is another way. And maybe my father's method of, and I think Elizabeth spoke about it, not everyone managed to speak about it or forgive or be involved. My father didn't. Everything came out in nightmares at night, but nothing came out during the day. So that is another method of doing it. And we observe that, survivors, witnesses, perpetrators, rescuers, resistors, and others many times choose not to speak after.
Elizabeth, just picking up on that, this past Monday, you said you were honored to participate in a genocide discussion at Oregon State University. It was a Genocide Awareness Day, the 50th anniversary of the liberation of Auschwitz by the Soviets. And you said that as part of the event, you had a photo exhibit of the genocide survivors featured in I Live to Tell the World. You said you gazed at the blazing blue eyes of Les Aigner and felt so sad that we have lost him and his stalwart determination to stand up against the Holocaust deniers. And then you said, and then I thought, what will we do when they are all gone? So that's a packed quote, and it alludes to the fact that there are genocide conferences going on everywhere. There are museums that are being built, as Tali has done. There are infinite amount of books, as yours, written about the survivors, about the perpetrators. Yet today, with all of that education, one has to ask, how is anti-Semitism at the level that it is at? How is divisiveness in the world growing dramatically? How are genocides still going on? How effective, Elizabeth, is our education, educating especially young people against hating others, speaking badly against others? How are we doing?
Well, in the U.S., I think we have not done well for a long time. I think now there's a certain number of states, about half the states in the United States, have mandated the teaching of Holocaust and/or genocide education from kindergarten through high school in public schools. It's kind of in the rollout phase for most places, so it's still kind of rockily moving along. I mean, how do you teach Holocaust and genocide education to kindergartners? I mean, 4 and 5-year-olds. You start with anti-bullying, and you start with anti-othering, and you start with making certain that there's not, as you say, divisiveness, that there's not us and them from the beginning. There's us. So I think that's what's being implemented at very early stages. But we also have a huge amount of denial in this country, which is terrifying to me. I mean, it was Les Aigner who was 92 when we lost him, but I mean, he said, how can you deny the Holocaust? How can you deny the death of more than 6 million people, deaths of more than 6 million people. How can that happen? But it's happening. And when you talk about anti-Semitism, yes, it's on the rise. We know the numbers. It's terrifying in this country. And it has a lot to do with just plain old, I'm sorry, bigotry of all dimensions, which is also on the rise, and it's being fed by certain segments of the population.
So, Provi, let me continue that question. How are we doing in terms of education?
Yeah, I really appreciate when I get to speak in schools, because when I get to have a conversation with students, that's when I understand that education, genocide education, is very much needed, and it's making a difference. Because sometimes I have students who are saying that they are fortunate to hear me speaking as a survivor. They call me a young survivor, probably because they know the Holocaust survivors, who took time to feel like they want to speak, which is not always easy. And they are challenged to know that after hearing from Holocaust survivors, there are other young survivors, and they are kind of sad to know that the genocide, keeps happening. If the genocide happened in Rwanda, keeps happening somewhere else, other countries, that followed after the Holocaust, then what can we do? So it brings to them kind of an engagement, and it's a challenge to them, things they can do to stop this genocide from happening. Because I remember there is a time, I don't remember which university I was speaking to, but it's in Texas. And one student told me that he will be a witness because he heard it from a witness. And they told me that they would do everything they can to share the truth about the genocide, but also from the Holocaust, because the numbers, 6 million of victims of Holocaust, should be enough, to prevent from other genocides to happen. Because after the Holocaust, there was never again here and there, but still nothing has been done. So the students are challenged and committed to do some work. You see their faces, some of them crying. You see that they really want to do something. So I would say that education is very important, and it's bringing change for those who are able and fortunate to hear from survivors. And once you do this, you see how they are challenged. That's when you get the courage to keep going, to keep doing things you do. And you feel like even if it's a small number that is convinced of how we can make a difference together, then it's worth it. So it's going well. That's what I can say.
Do you have experiences whereby people will come up to you, younger or older, and say that you've turned their thinking around, where they were hateful before, let's say, to Hutus or whatever their situation was, that your teaching, your training actually flipped them around?
Yes, I do. And I have some of them are teachers, because they were able to watch the movies that are not very much truthful about the genocide against Tutsi in Rwanda. And they will say, we didn't know this. We watched Hotel Rwanda, and is this the reality? So it's a surprise. They don't realize how much you can have a false information until you have a right person who is speaking from the heart and who is speaking truth. So I did, and I saw really humankind showing some hope of change if we had enough educators in our world, those who are dedicated to share their stories and touch the hearts of those who are listening to them. I did.
Elizabeth, you were vociferously shaking your head at her point. We can't hear you. We can't hear you.
sorry, muted.
Yeah.
I mean, several things to point out. One is, we don't want to get into competitive genocide here. We don't want to get into saying one is worse than the other. But it's really important to note, as you said, indeed, the Rwandan genocide lasted for, quote, only, unquote, 100 days. But if you look at the number of people who were killed, and spread that out over, I mean, it's the most efficient mass murder in history, I think, to what happened there, the number of people who were killed in the number of days. So, and yes, I think speaking out and educating is the answer. It's and as early as possible and as often as possible. I think Provi's right that there's a lot of kind of magical talking that goes along with some of these things. Some of the films we've seen, Schindler's List is a wonderful movie. It's a movie, right? So and Hotel Rwanda is a good example. I hear from people all the time, oh, I know just what happened. I saw Hotel Rwanda. Well, yeah. So I think that hearing that when Provi speaks out, when Emmanuel speaks out, when last night when I heard Rama Yosef doing her extraordinary, this beautiful 22-year-old child speaking out about her experience in Syria, where her father still is. She doesn't quite know where he is or if his village is still standing. Mm-hmm. It just matters. Last night here in Little Corvallis, Oregon, we filled an auditorium. Nobody got up and left. People wanted to hear these stories. So I think making the stories available, getting them out there, telling as many people, and making sure they're true, and making sure, as Provi said, validation was one of the really most important things for me in doing this research for this book. There were some stories we couldn't use because we couldn't verify certain details. It was very, very important to me to have very high standards of validation on those books because I didn't want them to be challenged on those things.
So, Tali, I mean, there are very different modalities of education that are used within Holocaust education, educating people on genocide, some of which include digital media, storytelling, art play, and so on. Can you tell us about some of those modalities, some of the things that you've implemented within your museum and through your work?
Absolutely. First of all, to listen to Provi, and we had the huge privilege to have an event with Provi and hear her story and hear her thinking. We have other survivors, Tutsi survivors in Johannesburg that are sharing their stories. Of course, Holocaust survivors, very few still, only 14 actually, 14 still living in Johannesburg and can share the stories. But to hear the stories is very, very effective. You called it storytelling, or we can call it testimonies, but really to stand, to tell what happened to you, but also before what happened to you, about your childhood, and also about how you rebuilt your life, how what you're doing now. And Provi is a great example of someone that not only rebuilt her life, but dedicates her life to education, in the commission, in Texas and so on. These are very, very important. So those testimonies are very, very important. I do not want to dismiss films or theater or exhibitions or poetry or books or anything else. All that is important. Maybe your pianist or Schindler's List or other films, The Promise about Armenia, are based on books. Maybe they're not exact, but at least someone that watches it will know something about it. Even Hotel Rwanda, which is a very problematic film because it's a very problematic, distorted a story in the film, I'm thinking, what? Someone that never heard about Rwanda, never knew that the country exists, never knew that anyone suffered there, at least now knows something, and maybe they will want to know more, and maybe they will read more and read, and listen to better stories than glorifying someone that was certainly not exactly a glorified personality. So I do think that is important. And finally, listen, we decided to create a center with permanent exhibition, with temporary exhibitions, with spaces, to study and research and teach and have dialogue and have theater and have films and have concerts, because I believe that these spaces attract a lot of people that will learn something about human behavior, about choices, about the us and them that Elizabeth spoke about, and hopefully will decide to use their critical thinking not to other. And certainly in our evaluations and our experience, lots and lots and lots of people exposed to people like Provi, it is an aha moment. It is an aha moment. I'll tell you very quickly, at the moment we're closing it in a few weeks' time, but we have an exhibition, temporary exhibition, about football, soccer, what you call in the United States. We call it football. And it's about the Bayern Munich Football Club, very, very famous football club in Germany, and the Holocaust, and their career before, during, and after. And it's a wonderful exhibition from Bayern Munich. One of the top guys came to open it. The sports minister came to open it. And football clubs came to watch the exhibition with our famous, we have like trumpets here in South Africa. We call it vuvuzelas. They're very, very loud.
Yes, vuvuzelas, yes.
Exactly. And can you imagine a Holocaust exhibition and vuvuzelas and 200 people living side by side and learning something about the Holocaust? Yeah. This is also a very, very good way to teach. So there are many, many ways. And I believe that any exposure, even the problematic ones that I mentioned around that particular film, at least open a door. Not ideal. And I have a list of not ideal books and films, really not ideal, that I really don't like. But at least maybe it opens the door or a little window to this subject.
All right. Thank you. Elizabeth, some of the individuals who have been involved or responsible for educating or teaching about genocide and the hazards, the dangers of it include such people, as we mentioned before, Raphael Lemkin. He should rest in peace. Didn't have an easy life, that man. Elie Wiesel, Romeo Dallaire, Canadian, was appointed force commander of the United Nations assistance mission in Rwanda prior to and during the 1994 genocide. That man gave a lot to get the message out about fighting genocide. Desmond Tutu, Samantha Powers, Mep Gis, and the list goes on. Now, prior to this interview, I asked each one of you to tell me what you would like me to ask, some good questions that I can put by you. And I want to read one that you wrote me, and I'm going to read it pretty much verbatim. You wrote, President Elon Musk, I think that's important, has urged Germans to, this is a great question, has urged Germans to cast off any feelings of guilt they might have pertaining to the Holocaust. And then you wrote, really, with a big question mark. While it is true that Gen X and Gen Z Germans had nothing to do with the Holocaust, you said because they were born long afterwards, is there a benefit to harboring the kind of empathy for its victims that might also involve guilt? Nicely worded. I had to think it through. Finally, I got it. What's your answer to your question?
Ooh, I just asked the question. I didn't give you the answer.
Come on, you can do it.
Well, honestly, I'm not sure that guilt is a productive emotion all the time. I think shame is a very productive emotion. I think recognizing, for example, here in the US, we have a lot to be ashamed of. Let's just start. I mean, before we even get to slavery, which is a big before, what has happened with the native population here in the US and elsewhere. And I see that as a stain of shame upon us. It's hard for me to feel guilty about things that happened 200 years before I was born, or 300, and I'm not sure that's productive. But I think that hammering in, I don't think you should let an entire population get off scot-free. I think they have to know that this happened as a consequence of actions perpetrated by their officials, by their ancestors, by perhaps their friends and neighbors. I think it's really important, not because they're responsible for it, but because that helps them to understand it and not to deny it and not to ignore it.
Okay. I asked some of my listeners and viewers to send in questions for you, and here are a couple. One is from Dr. Michael Silverman. He's an infectious disease doctor here in Ontario, and he writes, genocide often involves, first, the very slow spreading of misinformation, which is exactly what happened in Rwanda. It wasn't so slow, actually, to dehumanize other groups. When we see this in first stages, how can we warn against it and stop it without raising the issue of genocide early and therefore be accused of overstating the risk and demeaning the concept of genocide by making every ignorant racist statement equivalent to early genocidal behavior? I know, Provi, in Rwanda, I've read about this, that the dissemination of information, false information, on the radio and television, it was there. It was ubiquitous. But what Dr. Silverman is saying is, how can we start stymieing, firstly, the spreading of that information and not dive into, okay, this is going to turn into a genocide, but rather just deal with it as a racist comment? Provi.
Yes, it's not always easy to, to share, a story. Like Tali said, storytelling, when the audience is able to meet with a survivor who is physical in the room, it makes a difference. But of course, today, to spread the truth about the genocide, you have to use the social media platforms, because that's where everybody is. And unfortunately, you have to say things the way they are to keep, sharing the truth. Because if you have, let's say that you are a survivor, there is no way you can say that Tutsi have been killed without mentioning Hutu radicals, because they are the ones who were perpetrators. And it doesn't really mean that someone, maybe me, is a racist. And if I meet someone, who I know was not targeted in the genocide, I may not, feel that he was maybe part of, the perpetrators, but also it's very important to make it clear for allowing those who were not there to understand how the genocide was, for them to understand. Because if you're not providing all of the information, that's how they end up with the wrong person sharing the stories that are not true with their own agendas. So yeah, storytelling is one of those weapons that are going to be used to educate the community about the atrocities of the genocide. Yes, of course, with the social media going on, the spreading of false information is going to take place, but that's where, like Eliwizo said, when you hear a witness, you become a witness. So those who heard from us, those who were able to go to our country, who met with the survivors, like
Yes.
Elizabeth have a friend who is like a brother to her, and in Tali Nates, who is in a very good touch with survivors in Rwanda. So we're going to support each other. I will be here to talk about the genocide, my story in the genocide, because I know someone who heard me, or my friends from different communities, because they heard the truth from me. That's how they're going to be committed. They're going to commit themselves to spread the truth because they love me. I think that's another thing. Relationships and other good things that are happening around us are going to help in terms of spreading the truth about the genocide. Because if they know I am maybe a good friend and I went through this and they think I didn't deserve to go through this, that's how they get engaged in educating about the genocide as myself, you know how I am so much concerned about anti-Semitism going on. And also, if I see where my voice is needed as a survivor, that's where I will jump in and fill in the gap to share the story of the Holocaust, but also emphasize on the anti-Semitism going on. Even if the Holocaust happened, what lessons did we learn? But also, why is the anti-Semitism still going on? Why is it, spiking at this time? So I think we're going to come together and understand that it's a matter, it's a humankind matter. It's not that anti-Semitism is targeting, Jews only, because they will start with Jews but end up with everyone. So it's a responsibility for everybody to talk in order to prevent from these atrocities happening around us. Doesn't matter if it's from my country or from my religion or another thing, but we have to stand up for what's right, and it's our responsibility always. And this is what I tell my children: you better make sure you're doing a difference, even if it's small, but make sure you're doing something to fix the error that is happening around you.
Thank you, Provi.
Wow.
Another question that I received was from my dear friend Ellie Rubenstein, who is also a friend of Tali's. Ellie is the International Director of Education for March of the Living, very prominent program dealing with Holocaust education, as well as a senior rabbinical leader at Congregation Habonim. And Tali, Ellie asks, if Israel responds to its enemies and is not careful enough to avoid civilian casualties, does that constitute genocide?
So you come to the South African, to ask that.
Exactly.
That's
Yes.
very clever.
I thought that through. Yes.
Elon Musk question for Elizabeth, South Africa
I'm
and
thinking it through,
genocide.
Tali.
Okay.
Yeah.
Well, Elon Musk actually was born
Yes, he
in
was.
South Africa, so let's
Yes.
remember that. Genocide. We go back to the first question that you asked, really. And the question was, what is genocide? And let me just elaborate a little bit. Not every mass killing of people in any country has to be genocide. War crimes, wars of aggression, crimes against humanity. I can do a whole list of crimes or wars that take the lives of tens of thousands. I'm thinking about the Second World War, the bombing of Hiroshima and Nagasaki. Hiroshima, August 1945. One bomb, 130,000 dead, either at that time or after, and then more in Nagasaki. The bombing of London, the Blitz, the bombing of Dresden, the bombing of Hamburg. Are these crimes? Was anyone found guilty? Did anyone was taken to court? No. All right. So it is complicated. It is complicated. I do think that after the Second World War, the creation of an international system of justice is a good thing. I know that it's not a perfect thing, but it is a good thing to try and have systems, international systems in place to help us, behave better. Because, of course, wars, wherever, from the Bible time, you always had wars. You will always have wars. And I suspect that even war crimes, you will always have war crimes. So back to the numbers. Not every mass atrocity is genocide. Not every war is genocide. Not every war is crimes against humanity. So you do have to know what you're doing. And yes, there is definitely at the moment wars hopefully Israel and Gaza now is a ceasefire. Hopefully this ceasefire will continue. But Ukraine, Russia, Odessa was just bombed yesterday. Who is talking about it? Darfur, 8.5 million, are deported to refugee camps. No one is speaking about that. Next to us here in Mozambique and in other areas in Africa, lots of people dying. No one speaking about it. So it is complicated. I'm throwing a lot of ideas. I think the positive idea for me is that international law is important. The other idea is not every casualty will be coming to a trial, like in the case of Hiroshima or Dresden or London. And finally, it's not a game of numbers. It's large numbers, like in the case of Sierra Leone, that is not genocide. Syria is not recognized as genocide. And final words, the United Nations is only recognizing 4 cases as cases of genocide until now. And that is, of course, the Holocaust, but the Holocaust posthumously, because the United Nations, of course, was born after the Holocaust. But then it's only 3 cases. And the one is Rwanda, that we spoke a lot about. The other one is Cambodia, but only against the Cham Muslims and the Vietnamese, not the Khmer people. And finally, the genocide in Srebrenica. And that is in Srebrenica against the boys and men, 8,000 odd, not in Bosnia. It's a specific space. So we need to be a little bit careful when we throw the word.
It's a complicated issue.
That everything is.
Yeah, that's very clear. But I did see Elizabeth responding to you saying Syria is not considered to be a genocide. Did you disagree with that, Elizabeth?
Well, I think following the verbatim, the careful definition that we have, it would be arguable. But it would be arguable, and because there are different religious groups within Syria, it would also be arguable. It's hard for me to say, well, it was certainly a case of despoatry. I think in despoatry, maybe sometimes the two things overlap.
Okay.
Same thing, Cambodia, the same thing, you'd have to say. And of course, Sudan. So we're looking at, and other countries that are going on. I think Bosnia probably was cases of war crimes, terrible, terrible, terrible war crimes. The longest siege of a capital city in the history of modern warfare, 3 years. So
I think that when we talk numbers and the complicated dynamics that determine what is a genocide, how does it look, numbers, not numbers, it's a very theoretical piece, and it can take us down a particular road. But all of you are in the field dealing with human beings, some of whom were victims of genocides and some of whom were perpetrators of it. Elizabeth Mehren, in conclusion, in your best moment, when life is lucid, when you're excited about your work and hearing the narratives of these individuals who fought so hard to survive, what would you like for them? What would you like for the rest of the world in terms of education, in terms of stymieing genocide in its tracks? What is the best case scenario for you?
I think the best case scenario is to hear that cruelty has consequences, and to know what and to explain that the consequences are human beings and human lives, and as Provi pointed out, generations, not just and as we know, certainly we know from the Holocaust survivors, generations of people who are affected by these events. So I think that would be really important. I think it's also important to learn that you can't kill the human spirit. You can try, but the human spirit perseveres in spite of so much cruelty and atrocity. It's stunning to me in some ways, but that it continues. My Bosnian friend last night said, he made peace with himself after he'd been bombed in his own backyard. And He had his mouth full of dirt and gunpowder and thought he was going to die, but he made peace with himself, and so it's continued.
Provi, in conclusion, do you define yourself mostly as a Rwandan survivor, or much broader than that?
Yeah, I would like to to shed some light on how the term we use to talk about this genocide, because we have genocide deniers who are using Rwandan genocide. I don't know if we talked about this, but we have those who use Rwandan genocide to confuse those who need to learn that there has been a double genocide. So in this case, we discuss it as a genocide against Tutsi. Sorry, what was the question, Avram? I'm so sorry.
Yeah, I want to point out that your beautiful progeny, your children, are in the background. I spent a little bit of time with them, and I'll tell you something. The victory is not only success that you have, but it's your children. God bless them. And my question to you is, when you're lying in bed late at night in the wee hours of the night, and you're looking back at yourself, who am I, Provi? Do you define yourself as mostly as a survivor, or is it much broader than that?
Yeah, I define myself so much more than that, as a human being who deserves to live as others live, and who didn't have to go through what I went through to become an orphan at 11, but who is fortunate to be alive to share my story to prevent from these atrocities to happen anywhere else. So who is on a mission, like you all mentioned, we have a mission to make this world a better place for the next generation and the current generation. And I don't take it slightly, because even if I can sometimes feel like I am a survivor, but also a mother on a mission to save this young generation. And those who are going to help me are going to be my children and my friends and those who I get to meet. So I feel like I am not only a survivor and a mother, but also a messenger who is going to share a message of how we can educate the world. Of course, like Elizabeth mentioned, I think it's powerful that we have to focus on the consequences of the choices we make today.
Thank you. Tali, finally, when you're from South Africa, a country that has seen its own level of strife. I just actually read the book, Cry, the Beloved Country. It's a magnificent book, great movie. Now, you have been exposed to many, many good, fine people, and you have been exposed to people who have with not such great histories. Would you say ultimately, some people say that this is sort of a dreamy question, but I'm going to ask it. Do you believe we have the potential to stop hatred, to stop genocide, to stop the destruction of one nation, one peoples against another? Can we ultimately find that goodness, that beautiful spark inside of us that you have found through so many of the survivors whom you have dealt with? What's the end game here for humankind?
You know, I'm thinking about our mutual friend, Eli Rubinstein, the great storyteller.
Yes.
That told the story of Rabbi Carlebach, the late Rabbi Carlebach, that was once, asked about, don't you hate the Polish people, when he chose to go back to Poland, and what happened here and so on. And Eli is telling it much better than me. So Eli, sorry, butchering your story. But the main thing is that he said, if I had two souls, I will dedicate one soul to hate and one soul to love. But I have only one soul. So I choose what to dedicate my life to. And I think that is, in the end, my message. Elizabeth spoke about the resilience. Provi spoke about the messages, taking the messages forward, the education forward. And for me too, it is the choice to think about doing good, choosing the soul that have the love, or choosing the more challenging and other way that is hurting other people and damaging our world. My invitation as we close this wonderful conversation, the four of us, is to choose wisely. We have one life, one soul. Choose love.
Nicely said. Now, I have been playing around with artificial intelligence now for a few months, asking it to produce a poem of my guests. I think a couple of you have heard ones that have been developed for you. This is ode. This is an ode to this panel, and it's created by artificial intelligence. And it goes as follows. On a panel, three voices rise, Provi, Elizabeth, and Tully Wise. With microphones, they take the floor to speak of history, blood, and of war. Genocide, Provi begins with care, a crime so deep it's hard to bear. Intentional harm, destruction of whole, a people erased, a shattered soul. Elizabeth nods, her voice steady, from the Armenians, the Holocaust, to Rwanda's pain and Bosnia's cost. The world has seen, yet often ignores, the lessons we've learned, the endless wars. Tully adds with a thoughtful gaze, to recognize signs in future days, education must light the way so we can stand and not delay. Teach the past to guard the weak, for silence is the danger that we seek. They speak of strategies all aware that knowledge alone won't stop despair. Yet with the facts, the truth in hand, we might just take a righteous stand. The voices echo clear and true. Learn the history, see it through. For only then, if we unite, can we ensure no genocides light. A call to action, not for the past, but for a future where peace will last. Provi, Elizabeth, and Tully agree. Education's power sets the people free. Thank you so much to my guests. I appreciate you being here very much, and I wish you well, and I thank you from the bottom of my heart and behalf of every fine person in the world for the work that you're doing, because it's brilliant. It takes courage. It takes bravery, but you're forging ahead. And for that, we are extraordinarily thankful. I also want to thank my listeners and my viewers for being here. Take what you can out of this interview. And I would say clearly the bottom line is what Tully said in reference to a story about Shlomo Carlebach, which she butchered so badly. No, I'm kidding, Tully. Of which, if you have the option of choosing love or choosing hate, choose love. Be kind. Be good. Go out of your way to make sure that you do beautiful things for others. Until we meet again, Sei gesund, Yiddish for take good care, and das vidanya. And how do you say be well in Rwandan, Provi?
No, Tali can tell you. She knows.
All right. We'll do it next time. Thanks so much, folks. We will see you soon.